Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Bridget fixed her gaze on Remy, her eyes blazing from lack of sleep. She had anticipated this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the sharp pain in her chest. For years, she had carried the uncertainty, whispered misgivings, and quiet dread that had gnawed at her from the first moment she held her daughter, Lila. Bridget had always thought Lila's dark hair and inquiring hazel eyes reminded her of Remy's. The truth was now apparent, emblazoned in bold black letters on the sheet she was holding. However, the truth did not feel like liberation. It felt like a wound had reopened. Remy sat on the worn leather couch with his hands securely clutched between his knees. He did not look up. His broad shoulders, which were typically square and confident, bowed under Bridget's comments. He'd always been the steady one, the one who could laugh through any storm, the one who made Katie and Will believe the world was under control, even when it wasn't. But suddenly, his stillness was deafening. His jaw clenched, and his fingers drove into his hands, as if he could stem the tide of what was to come. Katie stood by the window, pressing her fingers on the glass, her breath misting the pain. Her blonde hair hung in loose waves over her shoulders, but her customary warmth was vanished, replaced with a brittle strain. She'd been Bridget's best friend since high school, holding her hand through every sorrow and late-night confession. But this was different. Katie's gaze shifted between Bridget and Remy, her thoughts racing to fit together the bits of a story she hadn't heard. How had this occurred? When had this occurred? And why had Bridget concealed this from her? Will, resting against the wall, crossed his arms tightly across his chest. His keen features were masked by a look of incredulity, but his eyes revealed a glimmer of treachery. He and Remy had been inseparable since college, brothers in all but blood. They had exchanged beers, dreams, and secrets during late-night poker sessions. But this secret? This was a betrayal that went far deeper than any card game loss. Will's gaze shifted to Remy, looking for something, an explanation, a denial, anything, but Remy refused to meet his eyes. The DNA test was Bridget's last resort. For years, she'd raised Lila on her own, building a life in a small apartment filled with used furniture and ambitions she couldn't afford. She persuaded herself she didn't need explanations and that she could be enough for Lila. But as Lila developed, so did her questions. "Why don't I have a father, like the other kids?" she'd asked one night, her little voice piercing Bridget's chest. Bridget had no response, only a hazy remembrance of a summer 5 years ago, a fleeting time with Remy that she'd buried beneath layers of shame and denial. The summer had been a haze of heat and recklessness. Bridget, Katie, Will, and Remy had spent it at a lake cottage, a rare break from their hectic schedules. They were all in their mid-20s at the time, stuck between the freedom of youth and the impending weight of adulthood. The days were full with laughter, sunburns, and the clink of beer bottles beside the fire. Remy had been the center of it all, his easygoing charisma drawing them together like gravity. Bridget had always admired him from a distance, for his quick wit and ability to make everyone feel seen. But one night, after too many beers and a peaceful moment by the lake, adoration had evolved into something more. It was a mistake, she told herself the next morning, her head aching and her pulse beating with humiliation. Remy had been Katie's ex, after all. They'd split up amicably the year before, but there were rules, unspoken boundaries you didn't cross. Bridget had crossed a line, and she had carried the guilt ever since. When she found out she was pregnant, she couldn't bring herself to tell anyone, including Katie. She'd convinced herself it could have been someone else, a fleeting fling from the same summer, a way to rework the story in her head. But she had always known. 5 years later, the truth had finally out. Bridget had ordered the DNA test in secret, swabbing Lila's cheek while she slept and sending it out with the hope that it would prove her incorrect. But it had not. And now here they were, in her small living room, with the truth revealed. "Say something," Bridget asked, her voice breaking. "Remy, please." Remy eventually raised his head, his hazel eyes meeting her own. They were the same eyes she saw in Lila every day, and seeing them suddenly made her throat clench. "I didn't know," he admitted gently, his voice raspy. "Bridget, I swear I didn't know." Katie exhaled sharply, her hand lowering from the window. "You didn't know?" she repeated, her voice increasing. "How did you not know? You slept with her, Remy. You slept with my closest buddy and didn't mention it?" Remy trembled, but his gaze remained fixed on Bridget. "It was just one night, Katie. One dumb, drunken night. I didn't think," he paused, raking his hand through his dark hair. "I didn't think it meant anything." Bridget felt slapped by the comments. "It meant something to me," she explained, barely above a whisper. "It meant Lila." The room went silent again, the weight of Lila's name hanging between them. She was upstairs now, dozing on her small bed, oblivious to the storm raging below. Bridget had always tried to shelter her, shield her from the chaos of the outside world. But this was pandemonium she couldn't hide from anymore. Will pushed against the wall, his voice low but firm. "So what happens now, Remy? Are you just going to walk away? Pretend this did not happen." Remy's head snapped toward him, his eyes flashing with what appeared to be rage. "Do not do that, Will. Do not act like I am the evil guy here. I did not know, okay? I didn't realize she was pregnant. I had no idea about Lila. Whose fault is that?" Katie snapped, coming forward. "You were there, Remy. You made a choice. And now there's a child who has grown up without you because you didn't bother to check." Bridget's eyes welled up with tears, but she brushed them away. She didn't want to cry right now. She'd cried too many nights over this, over the what-ifs and could-have-beens. She had imagined telling Remy 1,000 times, saw him stepping up and becoming the father Lila deserved. But she had also imagined him walking away, and her terror had held her speechless for too long. "I should have told you," she explained, her voice quivering. "I understand that now. But, Remy, I was afraid. I was afraid you would not want her. Or me." Remy's expression softened, and for a brief moment, he resembled the Remy she'd known that summer, the one who'd made her laugh until her sides ached, who'd listened to her dreams. But his expression tightened again, and he shook his head. "I'm not sure how to do this, Bridget. I am not suitable as a father. You are aware of this." The words hit her hard, taking her breath away. She had prepared for this, telling herself she could manage it if he left. But hearing him say it aloud caused a different type of grief. It was the sound of a door closing, a hope she hadn't realized she was still holding on to. Katie moved closer to Bridget, laying her hand on her shoulder. "You don't get to just check out, Remy," she added, her voice sharp. "This isn't only about you anymore. There's a little girl upstairs who deserves more." Will nodded, his jaw set. "She's correct. You can't run from this." Remy stood, his motions jerky, as if he was resisting the need to bolt. "I'm not running," he responded, but his tone lacked confidence. "I just need time. I need to think." "Think." Bridget's voice soared, rage piercing through her anguish. "I have had 5 years to consider, Remy. It's been 5 years of doing this alone. You can't just go away and think. Lila needs you right now." He glanced at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite identify, regret, dread, or both. "I'm sorry," he murmured before taking heavy but rapid strides toward the door. "Remy, don't," Katie said, but he didn't stop. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound boomed through Bridget's chest like a gunshot. She collapsed into the couch, the DNA test results dropping from her grasp to the floor. Katie sat beside her, pulling her into an embrace, while Will stood by the window, watching out onto the street as Remy's car drove away. The room felt smaller now, with the walls closing in, and Bridget wondered how she had ever believed the truth would set her free. The next few days were a haze of habit and sadness. Bridget went through the motions, making Lila's breakfast, reading her bedtime stories, and addressing her incessant questions about the world. But every time was overshadowed by Remy's absence, the void he left when he went away. She kept waiting for him to call, to arrive at the door with an apology, a plan, or anything. But the phone remained silent, and the doorbell never rang. Katie and Will attempted to fill the gap. Katie came over every evening with takeout and stories to make Bridget laugh. Will repaired the faulty faucet in the kitchen and played with Lila, allowing her to climb on his back like a jungle gym. They were her family in every way that mattered, yet they could not take away the pain of Remy's rejection. Bridget sat at the kitchen table one night, after Lila had fallen asleep, with an unfinished glass of wine in front of her. Katie was there scrolling through her phone, but she put it down when she saw Bridget's expression. "He's not coming back, is he?" Bridget inquired, her voice barely audible. Katie stretched across the table and squeezed her hand. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "You don't need him, Bridget. You've been doing this on your own, and you're incredible. Lila is amazing because of you." Bridget nodded, but her words did not fill the need. She thought about Lila's hazel eyes, which were so similar to Remy's, and wondered how she would explain this one day. How do you explain to a youngster that their father chose to go away? How can you get them to understand that it is not their fault? Weeks became months, and seasons changed. Lila began kindergarten, her knapsack larger than she was, and her smile brighter than ever. Bridget watched her grow, amazed by her strength and delight. But there were times, quiet moments, when Lila asked about her father, or when Bridget caught a glimpse of Remy in her daughter's laugh, when the agony flared up again. Bridget took Lila to the park on a crisp fall day. They were sitting on a bench, sharing a bag of goldfish crackers, when Bridget noticed him. Remy is standing by the playground, watching them from a distance. His hands were in his pockets, and his expression was unreadable. Bridget felt her pulse jolt as their gazes locked for a brief instant. She brushed crumbs from her lap, and approached him with Lila's hand in hers. "What are you doing here?" she inquired, her voice firm despite the fury within her. Remy stared at Lila, and then back at Bridget. "I don't know," he said. "I just wanted to see her," Lila said, tilting her head and eyeing him with her hazel eyes. "Who are you?" she inquired, her tone inquiring but not hostile. Remy kneeled down, his gaze softening. "I'm someone who wants to know you," he added in a heavy voice. "If that's okay." Bridget's throat clenched, but she refused to look away. She could see the regret in his eyes, the weight of his decisions. She also glimpsed a spark of optimism, weak but real. "Okay," she replied gently, not to him but to Lila. For the little girl who deserved to know her father, even if it was difficult and hurtful. They stood there, the three of them, in the fading light of the afternoon, and Bridget sensed the beginnings of something new. Not forgiveness quite yet, but the prospect of it. The possibility of a future in which the truth did not have to be a wound, but rather a bridge that they could cross together, one cautious step at a time. "Remy, you're the father," Bridget told Remy as she read the DNA test findings. Katie and Will were shocked. The words clung in the air like smoke, refusing to disperse. The modest kitchen, which was filled with morning sunlight, suddenly felt cooler. Bridget held the paper with trembling hands. She had expected rage, perhaps denial, but not the startled hush that filled the room. Remy's lips parted, but no words emerged. His gaze shifted from Bridget to Katie and back, looking for a logical reason. Katie stood transfixed alongside Will, arms wrapped around herself, as if to protect what remained of her heart. Finally, Remy spoke. That's not possible," he muttered barely above a whisper. "There must be a mistake," Bridget said, her voice firm despite her tearful eyes. "There is no mistake. I sent it to 2 separate laboratories, Remy. Both returned the same." The stillness grew. A dog barked outside, but the sound was strangely distant. The kitchen clock ticked. The air smelled vaguely like coffee that had not been touched. Will, who had been standing next to Katie, made a hesitant step forward. His mouth was squeezed so firmly it appeared painful. "You're telling me," he asked, his voice low and menacing, "that you're the father of my child?" Remy swallowed hard. I did not know. I swear to you, Will, I didn't know." Katie's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Remy, stop lying. You knew." Her words struck him like a slap. Remy stared at her, his eyes wide with surprise and shame. No, Katie, do not do this here. Please. Bridget's fingers clenched around the paper, crumpling the edges. You both lied to me, she admitted quietly. You convinced me that I was foolish for doubting. Katie's tears flowed down her face. Bridget, I never intended for any of this to happen. This was a mistake. One night. That's all. In one night? Bridget repeated, her voice shaking. And that one night destroyed everything. Remy sat down, face pale and hands trembling. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he said softly. Will, you are my best friend. Katie, she was hurt. You two were fighting, and Will slammed his fist onto the counter, making everyone jump. Don't make any excuses. Katie sobbed. We did not plan it. I swear. Bridget glanced at them both, her husband and her closest friend, and felt her chest constrict to the point where it was difficult to breathe. She wanted to shout, hurl something, and relieve the misery, but instead she stood there, shaking, as the weight of treachery crushed her. The baby monitor on the counter crackled slightly, and the child's faint cooing could be heard from the other room. Their child. Or, more accurately, it is no longer theirs. Bridget's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. I thought she was ours, she murmured. I thought she was my little girl. Remy gently raised his head. Yes, she is. Bridget, you are the one who reared her. You are her mother in every way that matters. Don't you dare say that to me, Bridget screamed, her voice cutting through tears. Katie wiped her eyes. You lied to me every single day since she was born. Bridget, please. I didn't know for sure until the doubts began. I wanted to believe she was Will's. Will turned against her, his voice breaking. You wanted to believe? You knew there was a chance she wasn't mine, yet you said nothing? Katie covered her mouth and sobbed. I thought if I said it, I'd lose everything. Bridget laughed hollowly. And now you've lost everything anyway. The baby's cries became louder. Bridget rose, walked to the other room, and scooped up the small girl. The infant peered up at her, innocent and oblivious, and reached for her with small hands. Bridget's tears dripped on the child's silken hair. She doesn't deserve this, Bridget said quietly. She didn't ask for any of it. Remy stood behind her, his voice shaking. You're correct. None of you did. Bridget turned around, holding the infant in her arms. Remy, you broke us. All of us. He did not argue. There was nothing more to say. The house was silent that night, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. Will had departed hours before, slamming the door behind him. Katie had followed him out, crying and attempting to convey what couldn't be understood. Remy sat on the couch, peering out the gloomy window. Bridget had not talked since putting the baby to sleep. She finally emerged at the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. She carried a little suitcase. I'm taking her to my sister's, she explained quietly. Remy stood. Bridget, please. Don't go like this. How else am I supposed to go? She asked. You want me to stay here and pretend everything's fine? Pretend that when I look at her, I don't notice your falsehoods. She's still your daughter, he added quietly. Nothing changes that. Everything changes that, Bridget responded. Everything. He took a step forward, but she shook her head. Don't, she whispered. You don't get to touch me anymore. Remy paused, his voice tight. He wanted to beg, to fall to his knees and pledge he'd make everything right, but he knew he couldn't. Some things cannot be undone. Bridget cast a peek at the crib. She will never know what you did. I won't let her grow up with lies. I'll tell her the truth someday, Remy murmured quietly. Bridget saw his gaze, her voice breaking. You don't get to decide that anymore. She turned and walked out the door. The sound of the automobile starting resonated slightly before fading into the night. Remy fell onto the couch and buried his face in his hands. He remained immobile for quite some time until light broke through the windows. He had not only lost his wife, but also the sole family that made him whole.